Welcome to the show. Glad to have you with us on what is shaping up to be the unofficial begin of summer here in our area. I was just listening to the weather forecast. It is supposed to be hot and sticky tomorrow. It was fairly hot and fairly sticky yesterday. Not so bad today because we've got some clouds and a little bit of breeze outside after some wind and rain kind of scattered off and on. And then there's Jesse in Cleveland. Do you have the window units blowing on full effect right now? What are things like there?
That's a funny question you ask because my wife acts like it's not 85 degrees and hot. Every time I get up, she's got it on like half fan in one room, turned off in another room. And I'm like, what are you doing? It's 85 degrees out and you were sweating in the bed last night. Why are we turning down the window units? She's like, well, I don't want to pay the energy bill this summer. I was like, I don't know what to tell you. We pay this
Nobody
every
wants
summer.
to pay the energy bill. Yeah. Like you make your choice. Either you pay the bill or you're just hot and sticky and sweaty. That's
I have it.
Works, and
I have it really, really cool in here. I put in all the window units, the final window units over the weekend. I found out what doors to open, what doors to shut. I've created like tunnel ways of cool air. And then I get it all set up. And then next thing you know, she just reconfigures everything. And I'm like, it's 10 degrees hotter in here. I don't know what you're doing right now.
Have you tried the box fan where you turn it around so it theoretically sucks the hot air out and blows it out the window? Have you guys tried that?
No. It feels good though. Like when it's and under my control of configuration, it feels great in here. But for some reason, we're worried about the energy bill. Like it's not going to be 85 degrees out. And I just looked at the forecast here. It's supposed to rain all week. And, we live by obviously the lake, so it's going to be even muggier. I was like, I don't full blast. I don't care. That's what we're doing. Unless no one is in the house during the day, full blast.
Chris just cheered me up with his Top Gun Maverick quote of the day. Maybe this is what you need. The Navy needs Maverick. The kid needs Maverick. That's why I fought for you. That's why you're still here. That's what you needed to hear today. I could tell, Jesse. You needed a Top Gun Maverick quote.
Sure.
That's not doing it for you. How about 90 days until the season kicks off? Notre Dame, Wisconsin, September 6th. Does that fire you up at all?
That pushes the needle a little bit more for me. We're really like 3 months away. 90 days, 3 months away.
Yeah.
It's coming up quickly. It's coming up.
Math major. I'm glad you were able to solve that.
Thank you. Thank you. I know 90 divided by 3 is tough for you.
Private education paid off, so
I took control of that one.
Yes. All right. Well, today we are either going to unite the fan base or we are going to divide everybody. Do you think this is going to end up being the most divisive or unifying show?
I think this is going to be like a unified vent session. Everyone loves to hate.
Yes.
Not many opportunities do you get to hate, but this is a open hate zone. You are more than welcome to. This is kind of like Festivus, but the college football edition.
That's a good point. This could have easily been a Festivus show, couldn't it? I didn't even think about it that way. But I mean, like, it feels like, look, this is June 8th, right? And this is Monday. And when I was sitting around yesterday deciding, I've got a list of all these, I literally, when I went on vacation and I flew last week, I've got a Notre Dame topic file. I've got a general topic file. And between those two, I have 50 Word document pages full of different potential topics, like some of them already used, some of them not quite, and like I always kind of check it and I try to reorganize them. Like, okay, this is stuff that we should be talking about coming up, that kind of thing. And then, like others just kind of go by the wayside. There's a reason there's 50 pages because it's like they're not quite ready.
It's kind of your manifesto
to go. Yeah, a little bit, but this was one that really wasn't even, it wasn't on either one of those documents. I saw over the weekend, the Barstool Twitter account tweeted something like they asked a bunch of people in the office, who's the athlete that you hate the most? And so that's what I was going to come up. Like my thought was, okay, we can spin that and we can make it okay. As a Notre Dame fan, who's the athlete, the player, the coach, whatever you hate the most? And then I went, hold it. We can do more with this. There's so much more that can be had out of this topic. Tears of hate for Notre Dame, and not like tears crying, Tears, tears as in Tiers, tears, stacking them, layering
Think
them.
of it like a pyramid.
Yes, that's exactly it. Funny you say that, because the wife of one of my friends on the trip that we were just on had this basically like a pyramid scheme, and like that she was pitching, and like people were like, this sounds like a pyramid scheme, and she's like, oh no, not a pyramid scheme. But everyone who was talking about it on the side, sounds like a pyramid scheme to me. But
can we talk about that for a second? Why are pyramid schemes coming back? I feel like this was a thing in like the 80s, maybe early 90s, and then I think people caught on. You had like the people who were selling like the skincare or the beauty products.
That's what she was doing. It's skincare beauty products that she's
and they're back
working on. Yeah. Late 90s, when I lived in Colorado, this guy who worked at the radio station I worked at, he was a sales guy, and he's like, hey, I'd like to come over and talk to you about something. And I don't even think he put it like that. It was like, come over. I got, all right, whatever. And, so he comes down, we sit down at the kitchen table, and we're talking, and my wife is gone. You're gone. I think, like she had taken you, and you were, like out visiting family or something like that. So I'm stuck with this guy. And literally an hour into this thing, I'm like, is this Amway? Is that where this is going? And I just shut it down. I'm like, we're done here. I'm sorry. You're a nice guy. We're done. We're not going any farther with this.
For the sake of our relationship, you need to leave right now.
That's right. There's the door. I'll see you on Monday. By the way, bring this kind of energy when you're actually selling for the radio station. But I digress. We are going to do tiers of Notre Dame hatred. Again, TIERS, pyramids of Notre Dame hatred. The most hated coaches, the most hated teams, and the most hated media members, which I think they're all going to be a fun exercise. But so that's what we're going to do. We're going to do multiple tiers today of, like who Notre Dame fans, I think, hate the most, whether it's rivals, other teams, whatever it happens to be. And I think, like Salty says, I mean, he gets the show. I love a show that's built on good old-fashioned hate. It is infrequently observed, but college football runs on hate. I could not agree more with that, Salty. I could not agree more. You get it. That's the one time I'll say that. Maybe. Bear1234 says we could always argue over who should be the number 2 quarterback for 2 hours. See, what do you want to argue about in June? Who you hate the most, or who's going to be the number 2 quarterback now that Teddy Girard is on campus with the rest of the freshmen this weekend?
I saw that. I did see is it the early enrollees, or is it the normal enrollees?
This is the normal enrollees who are here for the first time. Well, really, they're all coming back, but all the freshmen who weren't here in the spring are here for the first time, essentially, as well.
I saw the Instagram post by Notre Dame football of all you could tell it's the freshmen, man. Their faces are just so young, and the bodies are so raw and not toned up. And I'm like, ooh, it's like silly putty getting ready to be molded almost.
Yes. By the way, we will talk about the Brendan Sorsby thing. We're going to save that for rapid fire. I feel like we'll be talking about it for a little bit. The judge in Texas who made his decision on Brendan Sorsby and allowing the Texas Tech quarterback his eligibility. I mean, raise your hand if you saw that coming. I think we'd all have our hands up in the air. Let's do some tiers, though. Some hate tiers. We're going to build these things as we go. We'll kind of go back and forth building these tiers, taking turns with the nominations. So Jesse will put one on the top tier. Then I'll put, the team on the second tier. Jesse will put the next team on the second tier, and on. We'll do basically 10 teams, 10 coaches, potentially 10 media members. There could be some honorable mention for all we know. Like if Jesse or I, each have some that don't quite add up to 10. Now for the teams, I think that obviously there are going to be some really obvious ones to start off the teams that'll be at the top. I'll be shocked if we don't have the same one at the top of the team pyramid, but you can also name like a team from a specific year if you would like to. Like it doesn't just have to be that team in general. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see. I almost want to put forth a motion that it should be specific years for the teams because I
that's
feel
a little
like
too much. That's a little too much.
oh, sorry, some of us did all of our homework today.
Doesn't have to be specific. Well, look, I'll just let you go. Do you want to? I'll give you your choice. You can go first on coaches, or you can go first on teams. Which would you rather go first on?
I'd rather go first on teams.
All right. Who's at the top of your Notre Dame hate team tier?
I mean, I think this one's fairly obvious. USC. It is one of the most longstanding rivalries in all of college football that no longer exists. Obviously, as a Notre Dame fan, I'm casting a blame on the other side. I do think that, in any type of argument, there's blame on both sides of the party. But I think USC has majority of the blame. It's kind of like an 80-20 split, in my opinion. But I was going to take it one step further, and I was going to tell you my most hated USC team of all time.
I was going to say, like, Notre Dame USC rivalry number one, right? Although now the rivalry is over. And I think that more reason now than ever for Notre Dame fans to absolutely hate USC. If you didn't absolutely hate them before and you're a Notre Dame fan, I can't imagine why you don't hate them now if you're a Notre Dame fan. So absolutely public enemy number one, especially in the climate that we're in right now. USC pulling out of the longest running intersectional series ever. Southern Cal is at the top of the list. Now, if you have a specific reason that triggered you, Jesse, that makes you put USC at the top of the list, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the game or the team that really kind of rooted my rivalry was the 2005 USC team. Obviously, the Bush push. That's just a core memory for me. And really, when I feel like I knew about the Notre Dame USC rivalry, but that's when it really, again, ignited for me because it felt like a game was taken out of Notre Dame's hands. And I know the Bush push was a thing, but to me, the more important play was the 90-yard screen that was before it. You have to be able to stop that play, and the Bush push never happened.
The pass to Jarrett.
Yeah. And I'll leave it at that because I don't want to take some of your thunder on the next tier. So I have thoughts about all of these things.
No, I mean, it makes sense for you because that essentially you were 9 years old when that happened. So 2005, the Bush push game, and you were at the Bush push game. And it makes sense because that really shaped your memory, your perception of the Notre Dame USC rivalry. That wasn't the first Notre Dame USC game you had gone to. You went a couple years before that as well, but that was the one, and actually even a couple years before that, I believe. That was the one, though, where there was really, for the first time in your lifetime, something on the line when Notre Dame and USC played. And so to have the rug pulled out.
Yeah, Notre Dame was back to being good, and it was good versus good, your number one rival, and a very meaningful, game that had a lot of impact on the rest of the season and how the season ended. That was kind of my first core memory of I hate this team.
I absolutely. I can't disagree with any of that. And as Tanner says, Ambrose Wooden still punching air to this day. Unfortunately, that is the way it goes. Okay, so Southern Cal sits at the top of the Notre Dame hated teams tier 2. So we've got two teams that go on tier 2. Again, think of this as a pyramid. And Michigan has to go here on the second tier, and they've got to lead off the second tier. I mean, this was every bit as bitter for as long as they were playing. And I mean, going back more than a century to the origins of the rivalry with Fielding Yost and the anti-Catholic hate and, all the people still screaming over a century later about Notre Dame and independence. Well, you can blame Michigan for the fact that Notre Dame is still independent right now. They wanted to be in the Western Conference. Fielding Yost in Michigan would not let them in. And so Notre Dame forged its independence, has remained independence all these years later, and they continue to stand on that independence. And the college football world may hate Notre Dame now, but you have no one really but Michigan to blame for it. And so that's why Michigan has to sit on tier 2, right behind Southern Cal, nipping on the heels to me in terms of Notre Dame fan hatred.
Yeah, so I see a lot of people in the chat kind of debating USC and Michigan. I think what sets it over the top for me is Notre Dame and USC have just played more. It's a rivalry that dates back even longer. I will say, though, what makes it close, because it is close, Michigan fans are way worse than USC fans. I've actually encountered really nice
proximity to them. Like they live amongst us in this area. That's
the
what
Michiana area, obviously.
Yes.
But
literally,
no, like
from our old house, maybe not literally, but you could almost have thrown a rock into Michigan from where we live. Vince can almost throw a football in Driscoll into Michigan from where they live.
Right. And so I just think that the Michigan fans are filled with more venom in their souls. I remember me and my friends, this was after the Bush push. I was maybe in high school, late middle school. Some USC guy sold me 2 tickets to the USC and Notre Dame game for like face value, maybe even cheaper, to me and my best friend. And we ended up sitting right next to him at the game. And he was like, I just wanted to make sure you like, these didn't go to a scalper. I knew, you kids actually wanted to go to this game and enjoy it. So like that always sticks with me. And I'll always remember that moment as like USC fans aren't, we that day encountered some good ones, but it feels like the majority of Michigan fans are just all awful.
It's not, with the exception of things that have, and again, social media takes things to another level, but part of the reason Michigan, Purdue, Michigan State, when Notre Dame was playing those teams regularly, again, like there are fans of all those teams who live right, like big clusters of especially Purdue, obviously, but Michigan and Michigan State. Now, do you find a USC fan or two in South Bend? Sure, but obviously not to the same level as you do Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue fans. It's just different. I can accept people who want to put Michigan at the top because again, it was every bit as bitter and for about 20, 25 years or so, Notre Dame and Michigan were playing very regularly. And then it was when Notre Dame entered into the ACC agreement and the Big Ten expanded the first time and they added another conference game. It just made it so that they couldn't continue to play every year. So they, Notre Dame couldn't continue any of those rivalries. And now they're all that much more intermittent. But I can totally accept, and I would have agreed with it as well, because with the exception of the Pete Carroll era, USC has been very up and down. But when Notre Dame and Michigan were playing, Michigan was a consistent top 15, at least top 20 type team competing for national championships here and there. They obviously had their up and down years as well, but I think that they were a lot more competitive. And you add in the fact that they're right here, I think that even added to it. So we got USC at the top. We got Michigan leading up tier 2. We got room for one more team on tier 2. Who are you going to put there, Jesse?
Yeah, I think this is where we're going to get a lot of pushback is going on this last tier 2 team into tier 3. I'm going to go personally with Ohio State on this one.
Ooh, okay.
And this is just, again, since 1996, the perspective since 1996, but what has Ohio State done to Notre Dame since 1996? They beat them in the Fiesta Bowl in 2005. They beat them in another Fiesta Bowl in 2015. They beat them in the regular season 2022 and 2023. Then, of course, 2 years ago, they beat them in the national championship. I also have lived in Ohio the last 6 years, and so being surrounded by Ohio State fans it's miserable, to be honest with you. If there's one thing I tell people that unifies the state of Ohio, that's like the religion of this entire state, it's Ohio State football. It's the one thing that everyone can agree upon, unless you find a random Michigan fan that lives in Ohio. So it's just been the big games, and and most of them Notre Dame has gotten humiliated by Ohio State. And then of course the collapse where Notre Dame didn't have enough players on the field. A lot of those games, the national championship where they score first
and
and
you
then
throw
bring it
in
back
the
a little bit.
You throw in the Ryan Day stuff, And I actually just realized I forgot to put Ryan Day on my hated coaches tier. So I'm going to have to like when we get to the coaches, I'm going to have to make that up unless you bring him up first. But no, you're absolutely right. Like you've got Ohio State a couple tiers higher than what I have them, but because of recency, I can see what you're saying, because Ohio State has won all those games, and you throw in the fact it's not even been 2 years since Notre Dame lost to them in the national championship game, and all three of the games, the championship game ended up being close, but the two regular season games were both close and came down to the fourth quarter. All three of those games came down to the fourth quarter. And again, you throw in Ryan Day and Lou Holtz in the back and forth and all that kind of stuff. There's a great case for Ohio State being up there. Again, I don't have them quite as high, but I completely understand why you would have them up there.
So who would, now that I guess we're moving into the next tier, who would have been your tier 2, but now tier 3 team?
See, this is interesting because this is a cautionary tale for Southern Cal in the be careful what you wish for thing, because Michigan State, Purdue, Miami. There was obviously a time in the 80s and into the 90s a little bit, with Miami. They got off early, but Notre Dame was playing all those teams every year. And every one of those was a rivalry game to some extent. There was a trophy on the line for, I think, all but the Miami game. I don't think the Miami game ever had a trophy on the line. But those other games, Michigan State, Purdue, they were all trophy games. But look at what's happened since those games have gone off the schedule. There's like rivalry to some extent for all of those fan bases and in those schools, back and forth toward Notre Dame, but they're not quite thought of in the same way. But what happens once you play them? And what happens once there's a little bit of controversy to kind of stir the pot on the rivalry? I've got Miami on tier 2 of the Notre Dame rivals. I said a year ago at this time, going into the season opener, that Notre Dame Miami wasn't really a rivalry anymore. Why? Because they had barely played. It had been almost 10 years since Notre Dame and Miami had even played each other. And then they finally play each other. And then look at all the, Notre Dame wins a close game or loses a close game on the road. And then you had all the stuff. All that college football playoff controversy really stirred up a lot of those dormant feelings. And so just by the fact that they played, it was a very close competitive game. You've got two teams who both went to the national championship game a year apart, both Notre Dame and Miami, and now they're going to play again this year, and that's really all a lot of people want to talk about, even though the game isn't until November. So I've got Miami on my tier 2, along with Michigan, with USC sitting in tier number 1. But again, I get your Ohio State because there's a little bit more history there in recent years.
Definitely. I think now is where I'm going to start kind of switching over to some more. Oh,
go ahead.
I was going to do more like specific year teams because I think now is where it gets a little bit, at least for me. Because that's kind of like the big 4 in my opinion. But I'm going to go now to.
It feels like you're about to let it trip off your tongue, and we need to take our break.
Okay.
And then I will let you trip the next one off your tongue. So we're building our team tier of hatred for Notre Dame football fans. Southern Cal, Michigan, Miami, Ohio State have all shown up to different degrees in the top 2 tiers. So basically we've got Southern Cal, Michigan, Ohio State in the first 2 tiers. I've got Miami because you got the first choice. I've got Miami leading off the 3rd tier, and we will see where the 3rd tier goes after we take a timeout. And then hopefully we've also still got time to do coaches and maybe some of the media guys. If we don't get the media guys, we can always throw that into rapid fire tomorrow, I guess, if we want to. So All right, we'll take our break. We'll come back. Jesse will give our next Notre Dame hate tier team as we continue with the tiers of hatred for Notre Dame football on Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.
Game one, baby, tomorrow.
Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com continues. Sports Radio WSBT and the IrishBreakdown.com YouTube channels, along with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. We're doing Notre Dame football hate tiers today. We are putting into a tier the teams Notre Dame fans hate the most. We started with the most appropriate, Southern Cal, in tier number 1 at the top of this tier / pyramid, whatever you want to call it. Michigan and Ohio State reside on tier number 2. We started tier number 3 with Miami, and so that means Jesse gets to name the next team on tier number 3. There's 2 more teams that'll go on tier number 3, and then 4 teams at the bottom on tier number 4.
Yeah, I'm going to be short and sweet on this one because I feel like this is actually going a little bit longer than expected.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go 2012 and 2020 Alabama. Just both embarrassments of games on the national stage, more so the national championship rather than the semifinals of the college football playoff. But that Alabama team was just so good, and I don't think Notre Dame nearly knew what was coming for them, but doesn't mean that I don't hate that Alabama team for embarrassing Notre Dame the way that they did.
No, I can see that. And, both of us living through that game in the 2012 national championship game. A lot of people.
We were both there.
Yeah, we were. We were both there. And a lot of people who remember that game remember it for different things. I remember it for a couple of different things. One, Lewis Nix, injured in that game, kept playing, wouldn't come off the field, even, long after the result of the game had been decided. I do remember that. A lot of people, obviously had a lot of different thoughts about Lewis Nix, but it was a great season for him. Rest in peace, Lewis. But the other thing that I remember is it's just still ringing in my head. Clinton Dix. That guy was all over the field.
Interceptions, tackles.
Felt like he made every stinking play in that game for the Alabama defense. Clinton Dix. Man, good one. It's hard to disagree with that. The 2012 and 2020 Alabama teams, aka Nick Saban's Alabama teams. Again, I feel like there's a difference between the two. But so we've got Miami and those 2 Alabama teams sitting on tier number 3. I'm going with the 1993 Boston College team. And BC was obviously, I think the peak of the Notre Dame Boston College rivalry, if you want to call it that, was maybe not 1993, but Notre Dame was obviously flying high after beating number 1 Florida State the week before. They go to number 1 in the rankings. It looks like they've got a great chance to win their second national championship in 5 years. And then, boom, here comes Boston College, and they spoil the whole party. Still, obviously, we want to talk about head-to-head and how much head-to-head matters. Well, Notre Dame still beat Florida State head-to-head. They both won their bowl games, but Notre Dame did not get a share of the national championship in 1993, and Boston College is the reason why. So 1993 Boston College goes on tier number 3 for me to complete tier number 3.
All right, so down to the bottom tier, we have the final 4.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and take I'm going to take I'm going to go Florida State.
Okay.
1991, obviously the Phantom clipping game. And then another one that stood out to me was, I believe it was 2015.
Colorado. That was Colorado you're thinking of, the Phantom clipping game.
Oh.
That's all.
I'm gonna scratch that one off my list, actually, then. And I'm gonna go with Purdue. I think Purdue belongs on this list. It's just, I'm going to say this nicely, Notre Dame dominates Purdue. And I think in order to be hateful and resentful, that team's got to take something away from you. It's a longstanding rival in state, obviously. So I'll put Purdue on my list. It's just I feel like there's been other meaningful games, and that's why Purdue is kind of closer to the bottom of my tiers.
Yeah, and I feel like they still need to be on there, like you said, because they were a traditional rival. I mean, like they played Notre Dame played Purdue more continuously than they played Michigan for a long time. They played Michigan State more continuously than they played Michigan for a long time. And again, like if you were here in the peak, the Joe Tiller years of Kyle Orton and before that Drew Brees, when they were the quarterbacks and Tiller was running that spread offense and they were, run and shoot, whatever you want to call it, and they were, running up all those points. That was heated back then, and Purdue was beating Notre Dame fairly regularly for a stretch in the late 90s and early 2000s, and a couple of times it was not pretty, and that includes, I believe, 2003 under Tyrone Willingham with Kent Baer as the defensive coordinator, and Kent Baer deserves a great deal of the blame for that. But again, like living here and living amongst the Purdue people, it was nasty, regardless of what sport. When Notre Dame and Purdue were playing regularly back then, those Purdue Notre Dame, that was a nasty, bitter rivalry. So I do think that they deserve to be on tier number 4 of the Notre Dame hate tier. I do have Florida State on mine, and I think that it spurs from the fact that Florida State got the national championship, was crowned the national champion in 1993, even though Notre Dame won the head-to-head. I always kind of considered Florida State, one, because I liked Bobby Bowden, 2, because I despised Miami so much, and Florida State was Miami's chief rival. Like, I didn't mind them quite as much, but, amongst a good deal of the Notre Dame fan base, Florida State is considered pretty hated. And again, I think it starts from 1993, but as Josh says, you can throw in 2013, and there have obviously been some Notre Dame Florida State games over the years. 2014, so I put Florida State on my tier 4.
See, now is where we're getting down into the nitty gritty.
Two more teams to go for tier 4.
I have to go with Michigan State on this one.
I like it.
Again, it sucks because this rivalry hasn't been as much as it used to be, kind of in the early 2000s, 1990s, when Michigan State played more, regularly. But I'm excited that they're back on the schedule this season. I do think that it adds some layers to the Notre Dame, schedule, and so I'm gonna go with Michigan State on this one.
I like that. And again, another very bitter rivalry, like when Notre Dame and Michigan State were playing every year. Very bitter. Those games up at Spartan Stadium. There was,
and I wanted to say Pittsburgh just because I wanted to combine Michigan State and Pittsburgh because of the common denominator that'll come up later in the next tier. Yeah.
All right, you can say that. I had a hard time. There's no Stanford on this list, which I think is very telling, even though we can't keep trying to force feed this Notre Dame Stanford rivalry on us. And there is a trophy that's at stake for that game. Nobody, I think, really considers that a rivalry, though. Okay, great. Like the All Academic Bowl or whatever. I didn't put Pittsburgh either, just because Notre Dame has owned Pittsburgh so much. I realized, like, back in the 80s when Marino and Dorsett, 80s and 70s when those guys were there, it was a little bit different back then. But Pitt was, won a national championship. They were actual contenders back then. So I put Clemson on my tier 4 because Notre Dame has played them more regularly. We do have a college football playoff head-to-head. We've had some regular season head-to-heads where Notre Dame has won, and they're going to be on the schedule very regularly. I'll be curious to see how much this creeps up the charts here potentially over the next dozen or so years because of the fact that they're going to play more often. But I put Clemson on my tier 4.
I think that's, if it came down to it, I was actually thinking, like, who would I pick here in this last spot? Clemson is ultimately where I would have landed as well.
Chris says he doesn't dislike Michigan State. You have obviously not been around enough Michigan State fans to make that statement.
That's another one. If you go to a game at Michigan State, their fans do not like Notre Dame at all.
No, you better not wear anything that says Notre Dame. I mean, that's basically like going to a Philly game with a Cowboys jersey on, is what that is.
In their minor league stadium that holds like 30,000 people.
Yes. Nice Jumbotron, though. Okay, so our team hate tier for Notre Dame, Southern Cal in tier number 1, Michigan and Ohio State in tier number 2, Miami, the 2012 and 2020 Alabama teams, and the 1993 Boston College team on tier number 3, and then Florida State, Clemson, Purdue, and Michigan State occupy tier number 4. That is the team tier of Notre Dame hatred. D-Rock Irish says USC, Miami, Michigan, Florida State in that order. See, like this has got to stem from that 1993 game to have Florida State that high. I think that's interesting, but I think a lot of Notre Dame fans feel that way. This is a good point as well. I didn't even think about Penn State, and like there was a time where Notre Dame and Penn State were pretty good rivals, but no more because Penn State joined the Big Ten. They're not an independent. Notre Dame and Penn State stopped playing each other regularly. I would say that there's definitely some good back and forth, but they don't play each other enough for it to be to approach true rivalry status, I think, right now.
Agreed.
Let's move to the coaches tier. We did the team tier. Let's move to the coaches tier. I'll go ahead and give you the number 1 pick as well, because I think we're probably going to say the same thing. I'll be curious to see if we don't. I think this one could get fairly interesting because there are a lot of options on the table for the hatred for different coaches tier. And again, these can be, they don't have to be active coaches. They can be historical as well.
This is really tough. I think that you're going to be surprised with what I go with here. Okay. I'm going to have to go.
I'm going to say, hold on, before you say it. I think there are 2 answers that are both appropriate to sit on tier number 1, possibly a third, but I think there are 2 that are completely acceptable to be number 1, and I'm curious to see which one you say.
There's a lot of pressure now.
It's got to be one of the 2. I'll be shocked if you don't have one of the 2. Go ahead.
I have to go with Pete Carroll in this instance.
Really? So you're not with who I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. I have to go. I debated Lincoln Riley because obviously the rivalry is dead and he's the main chef in the kitchen for that.
I think it's got to be Lincoln Riley personally.
But that's the thing. It's like it could be. It's like I want to combine Pete Carroll and Lincoln Riley together because it's USC. I debated really hard between Pete Carroll and Lincoln Riley. The thing is I don't want to give Lincoln Riley the respect because he hasn't been a part of the rivalry like Pete Carroll has. And Pete Carroll stomped on Notre Dame's dreams and hopes for like 10 straight years, it felt like in the early Notre Dame thought it was good in the early 2000s until it played USC, and Pete Carroll ended our soul every single time at the end of the season. It was just a quarterback factory. It was Matt Leinart. It was now I'm going to blank on all the quarterbacks that played at USC.
Carson Palmer, Matt Leinart, Daniels. What's his name? The guy that's in Seattle now.
Sam Darnold.
Though I guess Carroll didn't stomp with Sam Darnold, but it was mostly Carson Palmer and Matt Leinart during the heyday.
So again, that's like when I was buying in as a Notre Dame fan, because before that it was Tyrone Willingham, and I was like, okay, Notre Dame is Notre Dame. But in that era, you had Charlie Weiss, Brady Quinn, Jeff Samardzija, Golden Tate. And again, USC would end their dreams every time, and it was just shady Pete Carroll. He was doing back deals. Obviously, Reggie Bush got stripped of his Heisman.
Got out before they lowered the boom.
Got out, and so that's why I don't want to give Pete Carroll Lincoln Riley the respect. Sanchez, that's who I was thinking of.
Mark Sanchez. So Carson Palmer, Mark Sanchez, Matt Leinart.
It was just a different quarterback, and Pete Carroll destroying us every single time.
Yes, taking Notre Dame's soul and just ramming it and just killing it, squashing
it. And I think the athletic department has a big role to play in the current situation alongside Lincoln Riley. He's not been a part of this rivalry enough for me to give him that respect.
Yeah, but don't you hate Lincoln Riley for ending the rivalry? It's really his
I told you it was between these two. It was between Carroll and Riley. So, 1A, 1B.
It's funny that I had Pete Carroll on tier 3, but you make an excellent point. You make an excellent case for Pete Carroll at the top of the list, and the fact that so many people in the YouTube chat are chiming in with Pete Carroll. We've got Jimmy Johnson, Pete Carroll. We've got Jimmy Johnson, Brian Kelly. See, this is Brian Kelly, Pete Carroll, and Jimmy Johnson. Those are the main people.
I'll be curious when the Brian Kelly discussion comes up, because I have a take on it, and I'll be curious to kind of see where we go with it. But so it sounds like I'm going Pete Carroll, and then you just took Lincoln Riley. So is it back to me?
Well, I've got a little bit of a decision to make here, whether or not I'm going to put Lincoln Riley on tier number 2, because again, like hearing your explanation for Pete Carroll, I can definitely see that. I got to go with this guy though, that Chris is singling out here. It's Brian Kelly has got to be on tier number 2. And so this is a little bit strategic, knowing, I only get to name one guy on tier number 2, and then you're going to name somebody else. I've got to ensure that Brian Kelly is on tier number 2, because there's just as big a case for Brian Kelly to be tier number 1 for Notre Dame football fans. Because look, they're calling this rule that they want to shove through Congress right now the Lane Kiffin rule about leaving your team while the season is still going on. It could easily be called the Brian Kelly rule, because remember, Notre Dame was still in college football playoff contention when Brian Kelly, just a couple of days after the season ended, on the West Coast at USC, and then went up to Tobias Merriweather's family's house and ate the burn ends and ate the barbecue, and then walked out of the house. And like, Brian Kelly pulled stakes. I don't care what he did before that. He left on the wrong note. I have made the case for why, Brian Kelly obviously helped rebuild Notre Dame and stabilize Notre Dame. But Brian Kelly left while his team was still in contention to be in the college football playoff a week before the conference championship games, when Notre Dame could have still made it into the playoff. And so for that reason, and, a lot of other reasons that people have named, Brian Kelly left here with left a very bad taste in a lot of Notre Dame fans and players' mouths. So I've got to put Brian Kelly on tier number 2 in terms of fan hatred, on the coaching hatred tier from a Notre Dame perspective.
So this is going to be shocking. Brian Kelly was in tier 3 for me.
Okay. We're not that far off then.
And I understand why it hurts a little bit more for you, because he was such a knucklehead towards the media as well. The way he treated the media also, I think, plays into yours as well. But here's what I'll say about Brian Kelly. I can't give the guy credit for a decision he made in 24 hours. He did bring Notre Dame back to a consistent 10-win clip. And ultimately, here's what I'm going to tell you. He's the reason why Marcus Freeman is head coach at Notre Dame. And so that's a big thing for me, because
so
without
you can gloss over everything else and say, well,
because he brought him back to the point where someone like Marcus Freeman could step in and take Notre Dame to the next step. He was the bridge between Charlie Weiss and where we are right now. Like, without Brian Kelly, we don't get Marcus Freeman, and we potentially don't see the rebuild of Notre Dame getting 10-win seasons, but not winning the big one. But now we get Marcus Freeman as the reward for suffering through the Brian Kelly era, and just what Marcus Freeman has done to stomp on Brian Kelly in that along the way has also, I think, been therapeutic as well.
It's completely fair, but two things can be true at the same time, because I agree about all the things that you said. Like, because we all, as Notre Dame, fans, media, however you want to look at it, we went through the Bob Davie, Tyrone Willingham, Charlie Weiss years of one good year, one bad year, one good year, one bad, and then all of a sudden you get a couple of bad years together, and the plummet of Charlie Weiss. Like, there was all this unevenness, and the program was just very erratic, I think would be the best way to explain it, for about 20 or so years post Lou Holtz. And Brian Kelly did stabilize the program. He is a program builder. He is a player development guy, but you can, all those things, and he did lead to Marcus Freeman. All those things can be true, and you can still despise the way he pulled up and left things here at Notre Dame. And that's why, it's not just me, because like years of doing this, there is a lot of anti-Brian Kelly hate from the Notre Dame fan base. And that's why, to me, he's got to be sitting there front and center on tier number 2 of the Notre Dame fan base hatred for different college football coaches.
Do I get time to sneak one more in before our next break?
Well, I said Brian Kelly. Well, we're going to end up being behind. So Pete Carroll is tier number 1. Brian Kelly leads tier number 2. Who's the other coach that you're going to put on tier number 2?
Ryan Day. Just can't stand. I want to respect him as a coach, but his nickname is, Third Base Day. And the way he handles himself after wins is like, just be a professional, and then obviously the spatting with Lou Holtz, who is always going to be a all-time better coach than Ryan Day when it's all said and done. So I have to go with Ryan Day because I've just never seen a guy more entitled, but handed the freaking, keys to the castle quite like Ryan Day.
I don't disagree with anything that you said. And look, we're not going to people, just to revert a minute, Salty's bringing this up. What happened with Declan Sullivan was a tragic accident. And I don't like it when people throw out Brian Kelly killed a kid. He obviously, he did not kill a kid. It was a tragic accident. Did it happen under his watch? Yes. If you want to assess the blame there, that's fine. But I'm not going to say anything more about that. It's obviously, I'll just leave it at that. Tragic accident. But Brian Kelly kept coaching obviously for a long time after that. So the university obviously felt differently. But as to the Ryan Day stuff, I don't disagree with anything that you said. Ryan Day has made himself someone that is very easy to hate, especially like if you're a Michigan fan, a fan of any other team in the Big Ten, a Notre Dame fan, obviously, with all of the head-to-head that has happened, recently. Ryan Day deserves to be on your tier number 2.
Correct.
So now we go to tier number 3. And we've got a couple of guys that I, had higher who are pushed down because you inserted Pete Carroll and Ryan Day in the top 2 tiers. Jimmy Johnson's got to lead off tier number 3 for me. And this goes back to what I was talking about when we were talking about Miami. And that is the fact that the long periods of time between Notre Dame and Miami playing have kind of, taken some of the edges off. But, there's a reason Lou Holtz said, "You saved Jimmy Johnson's bleep for me." We're not allowed to say that word on the radio. Like 1985, 58-7. Jimmy Johnson left the starters in and he ran that score up. And, like that was kind of the parting shot on Jerry Faust. He ran it up. He rubbed salt in the wound. And that was like Jimmy Johnson was every bit a major factor in what was a big time rivalry between Notre Dame and Miami. And, obviously my personal feelings for him changed a little bit after he went to the Dallas Cowboys and won a couple Super Bowls and basically was the architect of the 3rd Super Bowl won as well. But in terms of Notre Dame, Miami, Jimmy Johnson, public enemy number 1. So he's got to be on tier 3 for me.
I like that. Obviously wasn't around during that time, but it's so funny because he's on your probably most hated Notre Dame list, but also on your most favorite Cowboy list. So it's just kind of funny to see that unfold a little bit. I'm going to go with the obvious. I don't think he deserves to be at the top because he's never really done anything against Notre Dame besides complain. So Pat Narduzzi is where I'm finally giving him his shout out on the hate list here in tier 3. So I couldn't not get Pat Narduzzi on this list. It's so funny because I feel like in order to have some hate, it's usually because you beat Notre Dame, right, in a big game. Pat Narduzzi has never done that. He gets his butt kicked, and he still has something to say about Notre Dame after every time there's a microphone in front of him.
Jesse going with the Nard dog, Pat Narduzzi. And I'm gonna be honest. I had him on tier number 4. So you're slotting a lot of these guys up higher than what I would have had. I don't disagree on Pat Narduzzi. He is one who deserves to get the barbs that he gets from Notre Dame fans. So that means I've got to put Lincoln Riley on tier number 3, the guy who was going to be my tier number 1. This guy ruined a rivalry. He ruined the longest running intersectional rivalry in America. And Lincoln Riley, I still think that right now, Lincoln Riley may deserve to be tier number 1 as the most hated college football coach in terms of Notre Dame fans. Maybe the voting would be split, but Lincoln Riley has to go on tier number 3. He cannot fall to tier number 4 because he ended the rivalry and has done nothing but whine about how tough it is to coach at USC. And now he thinks that they're entering into some kind of championship window. So we'll see.
Completely agree. So that leaves one spot left on tier 3.
No, tier 3 is full. We've got Jimmy Johnson, Lincoln Riley, Pat Narduzzi.
Oh, you're right. I can't count. So this takes us to our final tier 4.
Tier 4. Yep.
I think I've got a couple in mind. I hope that they're still, available. I'm actually going to go with Jim Harbaugh on this tier. It's funny because Notre Dame played him during his time at Stanford and at Michigan. And obviously when he won that national championship at Michigan, there's a lot of, not even a lot of, there's cheating scandals all around it between coaches, players, you name it. And of course, then he takes off just like Pete Carroll and books it over to the NFL. No coincidence. So I'm going to put Jim Harbaugh on this tier 4. It's not as heated as obviously the ones above it, but I still believe he deserves to be on this list.
We're going to end up with a pretty good honorable mention list when this thing is over because, we've got some coaches on this thing. Again, we're doing the Notre Dame football coaching hatred tier, in terms of Notre Dame fans, the coaches that they would hate the most. We did teams to start off the show. Pete Carroll is at the top of the coaching tier. Brian Kelly, Ryan Day on tier number 2. Tier number 3 has Jimmy Johnson, Lincoln Riley, Pat Narduzzi. Jesse just led off tier number 4 with Jim Harbaugh, and that leaves us 3 spots. I've got to take Nard Dog off there because just put him on tier 3. I'm going to put this guy on. You probably don't know the name. And again, like how Notre Dame fans feel about this guy now, virtually a century plus later, is going to be different. But we talked about this when we were talking about the team tiers. I've got to put Fielding Yost on tier number 4, the former Michigan coach. I mean, like this guy, again, if it wasn't for Fielding Yost, Notre Dame would have been in the Western Conference more than 100 years ago. They would most likely not be independent right now. They would have been in the Big Ten a long time ago, but it was Fielding Yost, the Michigan coach. Notre Dame and Michigan didn't play from 1909 until 1942, and Fielding Yost is the main reason why. And again, like he is the one cited as, responsible for blackballing and boycotting Notre Dame from being in a conference. A lot of anti-Catholic and, anti-immigrant prejudice that was, very prevalent in the early 20th century that was, that this stemmed from when it came to Fielding Yost. And when you talk about the early bitter day, like Fielding Yost and Newt Rockne hated each other. There was a lot between those two guys. So Fielding Yost, for historical reasons, has got to be on tier number 4 of this Notre Dame hatred tier.
You got deep into your bag on that one. I'm
I
going to
did.
go with a little bit of a curveball here, and I hope you understand my rationale. I'm going to go with Urban Meyer. And the reason I'm going to go with Urban Meyer is he spent some time at Notre Dame, and then he consistently flirted with Notre Dame and then won national championships elsewhere while Notre Dame was kind of still stuck in their rut in the early 2000s and then kind of, before Brian Kelly ultimately came here as well. So I have to go with Urban Meyer. I hated seeing him win. It felt like he used Notre Dame as kind of leverage in some of those coaching cycles. And then just kind of how his career ended of just kind of being kind of, a slime ball at the end of the day. And so I have to put there's not as much like actual head to head, but it's that like what could have been in all those situations when Urban Meyer was coming up in the coaching cycle.
Yeah, I can see that, like he has tried to talk about, Notre Dame with some reverence at different points. It's a lot easier to do when you're retired now. And I agree with what you're saying. He it was kind of looked like he might come to Notre Dame after he left Utah and he obviously ultimately ended up going to Florida. Interesting. When he was being talked about, when he was at Utah still, I had him on my radio show here in town. He came on. Utah had a great year, and this was in late November, and I asked him, if he wanted to make any comment. He gave me a no comment when I asked him if he was interested in the Notre Dame job. He ended up taking the Florida job, and then fun fact, this was when I was also still doing Notre Dame baseball radio play-by-play. The next spring, Notre Dame ends up playing in the Gainesville Regional. He's the head coach at Florida. So I'm in my broadcast booth calling the Notre Dame Florida baseball game down there. Who sits in the booth right next to me? The Urban Meyer family, the whole family sitting, so a little kind of full circle thing there. Yeah, but I agree. It's hard to disagree with Urban Meyer. I'm going to throw another one that might be a little bit off some people's radar, but it's Joe Tiller, the former Purdue coach. Again, like a lot has gone from this rivalry right now, but when Joe Tiller was the head coach, there was zero love lost between the two programs. Joe Tiller sort of tried to play himself off as, kind of college football's grandpa, like the lovable grandpa. Not a nice guy, though. There's some specific things that I still won't necessarily say that I've heard that he said that was directed, toward Notre Dame and even some members of Notre Dame coaching family members and those kind of things. So I'm putting Joe Tiller on tier number 4. That gives you one more guy who's going to fill out our coaching tier here.
I'm going to give a shout to Dabo Swinney at the end of the day here. I think that Notre Dame has kind of started this, I guess you could say some sort of kind of rivalry here with Clemson. And then I don't like the most recent comments. He's just kind of jumping into the crowd of people, talking about Notre Dame and thinking he knows what Notre Dame does and doesn't have and, kind of their, I guess, standard procedures and protocols. So I'm going to go Dabo Swinney. There's probably someone better out there. But again, my list, I think, reflects more of kind of my lifetime. And then you kind of give the more, I didn't even know who Tiller was.
I gave some more historical ones, but I felt like we couldn't leave them off. Maybe there's probably not that much animosity right now. And I mean, look, we didn't even mention Brett Bielema. So, and
or Jeff Brom. I saw someone shout out Jeff Brom.
Jeff Brom, that's a good one. And let's be honest, like when Lloyd Carr was still coaching at Michigan, probably wasn't the most likable guy, when he was still the, in terms of Notre Dame fans, because it was a true rivalry when they were playing. Beat Notre Dame, I think, 5 times when he was the head coach, at least 5 times when he was the head coach at Michigan. Lloyd Carr, a lot more likable, though, with CJ Carr being here and the fact that Lloyd is wearing that Notre Dame gear, he's a lot more likable these days. Shout out Lloyd for the Notre Dame caps that he wears. Okay, so those are our hatred tiers. The coaching hatred tier from a Notre Dame perspective. Pete Carroll, tier 1. Brian Kelly, Ryan Day, tier 2. Jimmy Johnson, Lincoln Riley, Pat Narduzzi in tier 3, Urban Meyer, Fielding Yost, Joe Tiller, Dabo Sweeney in tier number 4. That is 10 that we've got there. And as far as the team hatred tier, Southern Cal at the top of the list, followed closely by Michigan and Ohio State in tier 2, Miami, 2012 and 2020 Alabama, 1993 Boston College, and then Florida State, Clemson, Purdue, Michigan State in tier number 4. I feel like those are some pretty good hatred tiers, Jesse.
We did some work on these tiers. I'm not going to lie.
We did. We worked it out. And we didn't even get to the media members. Somehow I thought we would have more time and we might even, not have enough. But good call. I think James Franklin, Hardwood says he needs to be on tier number 4. I think there's a good case for him. At the very least, an honorable mention. And because of Brett Bielema last week, a good honorable mention for him as well.
Agreed.
We'll take a break. When we come back, rapid fire. Some recent comments from Notre Dame offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock. We'll get into the Brendan Sorsby stuff as well in hour number 2 of the show, Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. It's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Ran a little bit long in the first hour of the show. Just getting started with rapid fire in hour number 2. I'm Sean Stiers along with Jesse Stiers. Today we heated it up with our Notre Dame hate tiers in the first hour. We were talking about doing media members. We had our tiers of those ready to go. We talked about players. We decided not to do those. Feels like we could easily do a couple shows on either one of those tiers if we wanted to, though, huh?
Yeah, we've got players. We could do media. I think media is going to be the most galvanizing of them all, because it's like no one will miss out on the opportunity to take shots on someone like the likes of Desmond Howard. Am I right? Like, that guy is like the number one most annoying Notre Dame media personality. But
I'll be curious to see who ends up. You and I have had different takes on who needs to be on the top tier so far with both the tiers that we did. Joseph says Miami should be rated higher than Ohio State. Notre Dame doesn't play the Buckeyes enough to be considered a top rival. But again, Notre Dame has played Ohio State many more times more recently than they have played Miami.
And all meaningful games.
Right. And like those games, obviously, in the late 80s and early 90s before the Notre Dame-Miami rivalry ended, those were much more bitter, but they were also 35-plus years ago, whereas Notre Dame played Ohio State 3 years in a row, and they hadn't played Miami for, 9 years prior to that. So I think that's I think that there's definitely a case for Ohio State because of the recency being higher on the list. Now, again, because of all the stuff that happened last year and the fact that Notre Dame and Miami will play again this year, I personally had Miami ahead of Ohio State. Jesse didn't feel that way. He got to make his pick for tier number 2. So, and as of right now, we don't know when Notre Dame and Ohio State are going to get to play again. All right. Notre Dame offensive coordinator, rapid fire. Again, if you missed any of that conversation, you can go back, you can download the podcast, you can watch it on either the Irish Breakdown or Sports Radio WSBT YouTube channels. And while you're there, subscribe to that Sports Radio WSBT YouTube channel. You'll be helping us out, and you can listen and watch anytime you want. Irish offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock was on the Believe in Giants podcast with Bob Papa and Carl Banks. They asked Denbrock for his thoughts on facing Wisconsin in this year's season opener. Here's what Denbrock had to say.
I mean, obviously there's some familiarity there. Coach Fickell, obviously I worked with Coach Fickell, and at Cincinnati I was the offensive coordinator there with him for a number of years before I went to LSU. So I'm sure he feels like he's got a pretty good beat on me, which is fine. We'll have a few things in the hopper for that one in particular. But, I think more than anything, we talk all the time around here about, not worrying about who the opponent is. And as excited as we are to play in Lambeau and to go against the University of Wisconsin, who I really think has improved their football team a great deal with some of the additions that they had in the offseason. If we put our focus on us and we put our concentration on us, I think we're going to be in pretty good shape as far as being ready to play that first game, even without the preseason game. The best thing we have going for us here is that we've got a really good defense to go against, even on the practice field, that gives us multiple looks and drives me crazy half the time. So it gives me an opportunity to vet a lot of that stuff on the practice field.
All right, so there is Mike Denbrock, again, asked about Wisconsin. So I've got some multiple questions on what you just heard him say there, Jesse. Let's start with the last part of his comment. Scale of 1 to 10, how underrated is it for C.J. Carr to face Notre Dame's defense throughout the offseason?
Yeah, I think it's super underrated. On a scale of 1 to 10, I kind of put it in the 8 area. It's to me, it's kind of that classic line of iron sharpens iron. I think it goes for both ways, though. I think C.J. Carr makes the defense better, and I think the defense makes C.J. Carr better. I mean, we're talking about a guy who is as a Heisman a top Heisman candidate going into the season, played tremendous in his first year as quarterback at Notre Dame. I've said it before last week. Most recently, Notre Dame's secondary is probably the best in the country. They're returning a lot of players on defense in terms of production. So I think it goes for both sides. And that's what makes this season so exciting is you have these guys constantly playing against the best every day at practice.
And when you think about especially the secondary that defense has right now, which is, gaining a lot of traction and continues to pull in traction in terms of being thought of as the number one secondary in America coming into this season. And they have the consensus number one cornerback in America with Leonard Moore, but then you throw in Christian Gray and, Sanders and, Adon Schuler and Tay Johnson and Luke Talich at number 3. And then, probably some other safety, whether it's Joey O'Brien or somebody else at number 4, facing that every day. Again, especially in the spring and those first couple of weeks of training camp. That's where most of this happens. When they're doing this in the spring, especially, and that's what Denbrock is coming off of. And so that's probably what's most fresh in his mind as he makes these comments. I put this at a number, at a 9, when you've got a quarterback like CJ Carr, who's already as advanced as he is, and then he has to go up against those kind of guys all spring, and he'll face those guys again, early, a lot when it's good versus good early on in training camp, because once you start to segue into season prep, it is more number one offense versus scout team defense and that kind of thing. You're not facing ones, you're not having ones versus one nearly as often, but that's a lot of reps in the offseason. So I put it at a 9 in terms of how potentially underrated that is. Salty Virginia Peanut says it's impossible to extract bulletin board material from Den Gluck. I think you're right. He is polished. He knows how to answer a question. That's for sure. Okay, next question from that quote. Does Notre Dame or Wisconsin benefit more from the matchup being in the season opener, do you think? He was talking about, like they can kind of, they've got a little bit different personnel, different offense and things like that. Like who do you think benefits more from this being the season opener?
Yeah, I think that, Mike Denbrock started to talk about a little bit. There's obviously some familiarity between the staffs. Both Marcus Freeman, Mike Denbrock have been on staff with Fickell at different, stops in their career. Wisconsin was putrid last year. And this is I'm serious. Like they were bad last year.
No, you're right.
And this is a make or break season for Fickell. And if things don't go right, he's going to be shown the door at Wisconsin. So I think that this game actually benefits Wisconsin more, but not for the reason that I think you would, because of what Mike Denbrock was alluding to in terms of, he knows his kind of style of offense and all that. Every coach will tell you, you can know what play is coming, but if you've got the players and athletes, you still got to stop it, And so I'm not really worried about that because Notre Dame's roster is so superior to Wisconsin. The reason why I think this game benefits Wisconsin more, to be honest with you, is Wisconsin can get a very early measuring stick where they are as a football program and where Fickell is going into this season that is a make or break season for him. I think they can be shown very early. I get it. Notre Dame is going to be a very good team and has national championship aspirations, but that doesn't mean that you can just go out and get your doors blown off by like 40 points to open the season. You got to show, I think, to the Wisconsin faithful, to the football program, to the boosters, to the NIL fund, that you got to have some sort of fight in this game just because it's, Notre Dame.
That's exactly right. Like Bear says it's Notre Dame. He says Wisconsin will get better as the year goes on. That's probably true. There's a good chance that it's true, but this is game number 1, and Wisconsin has the opportunity, especially in the first quarter.
You could still play well in a loss,
right? Like a lot of what you're talking about in terms of, is Luke Fickell going to make it past this season or even past the halfway point in the season, is how well do they show out in this first game? And for Wisconsin and for Luke Fickell, everything, I'm not saying the result of this game rides on it, but like you said, like, do they show enough against what is a top 10 team and in a lot of people's eyes, maybe even the number one team in the country. How much do they show? They also have the ability, there's a lot more of what Notre Dame is going to be on film that Luke Fickell and his staff have had an entire offseason to prepare for. There is a lot more unknown that Notre Dame is going to have to prepare for because of the fact that Wisconsin, has brought in
it's a whole new offense
from the transfer portal, and it's a whole new offense. There's a lot more unknown that Wisconsin's going to be able to throw at Notre Dame, and they will throw at Notre Dame early in this game. Notre Dame, yes, does have the talent advantage, and they have the advantage of they've got so much returning from last year, including the defense. But I think that it, again, especially early in this game, and the fact that Wisconsin will have an entire offseason to prepare and throw more unknowns. They're going to throw a lot more unknowns at Notre Dame than Notre Dame will the other way. Now, Denbrock said we've got some things that that we'll throw at them. They're going to try their best to do some things that Wisconsin's obviously not expecting. But I think that I think that going into this game, there's a little bit more advantage for Wisconsin from the unknown factor, things that they can throw at Notre Dame that Notre Dame hasn't seen on film yet. But at the end of the day, Notre Dame's talent will win out in this game because they've just got more across the board.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the thing is Notre Dame's defense is going to swallow up the offense outside of maybe some wrinkles that are thrown at them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more or less looking at, can Wisconsin's defense keep this a game competitively, maybe up until halftime, third quarter, because that's at least been something that Wisconsin's consistently been good at is while their offense has been horrible, their defense is still respectable.
Correct. So final question on this. Has Notre Dame, you heard Denbrock say, that like one of the things that they do at Notre Dame is they worry about themselves, not about who the opponent is. Has Notre Dame shown that they have done a good enough job of that? So, in the Marcus Freeman tenure, I guess.
No, but I've liked what I've seen recently. Like last year, we didn't have any of the Marshalls, Stanford, those sort of losses, Northern Illinois. But I mean, I think that's why that mantra has kind of become adopted is we just play ourselves. We play against ourselves and the rest will take care of itself. Have they done a good job not worrying about it in the whole duration of Marcus Freeman's time? No, but I'm very encouraged what I saw last season, and especially kind of their thought process going into the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame has won a pair of season openers under Marcus Freeman, and like you talked about, the Marshall, the Northern Illinois, the Stanford. Stanford doesn't get talked about enough for how bad that team was that beat Notre Dame early on. Now, the other side of that is, as you said, they took care of business, but they were it was a your backs are against the wall. You have no other choice but to take care of business last year after losing those first two games against a couple teams that ended up making the playoff. But I think that is still maybe in the back of some people's minds. If there's a question to be answered, like I don't think Marcus Freeman's going to take this game for granted. I don't think his coaches, his staff, his team is going to take this game for granted. But at the same time, I think that is maybe still that factor that kind of dangles out there just because of the fact that regardless of what the quality of opponent is, those, the majority of losses have come early in the season. Thank you for the super chat from Jacob. He said, just wanted to say thankful, grateful, and thankful. JS, Jacob Sweater Sweet. I don't know how you pronounce that last name. All right, we're just flying. We've done one rapid fire question. We've got to take a break, then we'll come back. We'll get into the Brendan Sorsby stuff and more when we continue on Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. It's weekday sports beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Rapid fire continues here on the 6 o'clock hour. Sean Stiers, Jesse Stiers, just addressing all different kinds of topics. We talked a lot of Notre Dame hatred in the first hour of the show. If you missed it, go back, watch it on either of the YouTube channels, Irish Breakdown or Sports Radio WSBT, or find it on the podcast. I think we nailed it. We did hate tears of hatred for Notre Dame fans, both coaches and teams. We're going to do media members tomorrow. I think you'll enjoy that because it feels like there's even a lot more hatred from fans toward media members these days. Don't you think?
Yes, I feel like that is the most unifying of the three.
Before we talk about Brendan Sorsby, since we just talked a little bit of Wisconsin, let's do guess the over-under win total for Wisconsin for the season. We take a look at their schedule, and then we go to FanDuel after we look at the schedule, and we each take a guess at what we think Wisconsin's win total for the season is going to be. As Jesse said earlier, Wisconsin was a hot mess last year. They only won 4 games. They had a brutal schedule, though. They played Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, and Illinois. They actually beat Illinois. They also played a ranked Washington team and won that. So, I mean, they played 4 teams that made the college football playoff last year, and they lost all 4 games. Their schedule this year is a lot more forgiving than that one. They obviously open up with Notre Dame, and then they have Western Illinois, followed by Eastern Michigan. So they get a couple bounce backs, get a chance to get back into shape. Then they go to Penn State. They host Michigan State. They're at UCLA. They host USC, at Iowa, host Rutgers, at Maryland, at Purdue, host Minnesota. So there's Wisconsin's schedule. Jesse likes to go through them one at a time. We're going to guess the over-under season win total for the Wisconsin Badgers. Notre Dame, that's a loss.
That's a loss.
Western Illinois, Eastern Michigan. Do you see them dropping either one of those?
No.
Okay. Penn State.
This is a tricky one, but I'm going to go with Penn State winning this game.
I think I am as well. So we've got them 2-2 right now. Then Michigan State.
They'll win that one.
Okay. UCLA on the road.
I think they'll win UCLA.
USC.
They'll lose USC.
At Iowa.
They'll lose to Iowa.
Rutgers.
I think they'll beat Rutgers.
At Maryland.
I don't Maryland and Minnesota. Minnesota is the last game. I think they'll split between these two, so I'm gonna split those two.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's a good call. And then at Purdue in between those two teams.
They'll lose that one. Or they'll beat Purdue. They'll beat Purdue.
Okay. So I don't know what your record is. I've got
them at like 6-6.
Yeah. I think 6.5 is going to be their number.
6.5 is also where I'm at.
Okay. We've got Andre says 6.5. Stymie says 4.5. Robin says 5.5. If they, again, 4-8 last year, but they played 4 teams that made the college football playoff. That is one of the toughest schedules you're going to see. Irish Chi-Town says 5.5 as well.
And I think that Penn State game is still a toss-up. I'm just giving the slight edge to Penn State, and I think the books are going to say that as well. So I think this is a healthy 6.5.
I do too. Go ahead.
I wouldn't be surprised if it does trickle up to 7.5, but the odds are in the under's favor.
Okay. So we're both locked in. We think that Wisconsin's over-under for the season will be 6.5. Bear says 5.25. I like that. All right. So I'm going to open up the FanDuel app. The Wisconsin over-under on FanDuel is 6.5. Nailed it.
Perfect. What is it, like minus 130?
I closed it before I looked.
Let's
see if I can find it again. Let's see. It shouldn't be too hard to find. Hang on. I forgot. I was going to look at that, and then I forgot as I swiped up.
You got too excited.
Yeah, the over is minus 122, so they're favored to go over. The
Mhm.
under is plus 100.
Okay.
Or the under is plus 100. So there you go. 6.5 on Wisconsin.
Nailed it.
All right. We've mostly done teams that are expected to do pretty well. So I kind of wanted to mix it up and challenge us a little bit more with the team not expected to do
Some
it.
averageness.
Yeah. Okay. Big news of the day in college football. Texas Tech quarterback Brendan Sorsby going to be able to play this season. No surprise, a judge in Texas granted Sorsby a preliminary injunction that prevents the NCAA from punishing him for violating sports gambling rules. The NCAA previously said Sorsby was ineligible to play this season after discovering he had wagered approximately $90,000. That is no small sum of money for a college, quote unquote, student athlete on professional and college sports over 4 years. That included 40 bets that Sorsby made, that he admittedly made on his own team when he was a freshman in Indiana in 2022. He will serve a 2-game suspension rather than the full season to open up the season that he's going to be able to play this year. So I think it's too simple to say, do you buy or sell this? What do you think? What is the NC or not the NCAA? What is this judge saying by making this ruling? He says that Sorsby would suffer, quote, irreparable harm if he's not allowed to play for Texas Tech this year.
I think what he's, referencing is his ability and his progression to go on and play at the professional level. Basically saying, if you strip this year away from him, it could jeopardize, something 5-10 years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a big joke at the end of the day. Like what this says to me is, first of all, why have rules if they're going to be blatantly broken, but you can just file an injunction with basically a judge that you're appointing yourself, because this was determined in Lubbock County. So no surprise, the judge was in favor of Texas Tech. I told you this earlier. If Texas Tech can buy a roster and be, in contention in 1 year, basically, what makes you think they don't have the money to appoint whatever judge they want down in Lubbock to make sure that they get a favorable outcome? It's just ridiculous. I can't say I'm surprised, though, because this was like the path that it was trending down. He's serving the 2-game suspension, and that was basically self-imposed. Like, the judge didn't decide that. Basically, Sorsby and his camp said, okay, we'll sit out the 2 games, and that should be good. And of course, those games are against Oregon State and Abilene Christian, so games that they'll likely win, without him. So I just think that most importantly, this is setting this and the Trinidad Chambliss ruling, again, with another favorable judge. It's just setting a bad precedent. Basically, you can break rules and get a judge that is going to file injunction in your favor, and we're just going to pretend like nothing ever happened.
Yeah, I mean, look, don't tell me that a 24-team college football playoff is going to ruin college football when now you can be the starting quarterback of a team that potentially will be in the college football playoff and bet on your own team in a college football playoff game with zero ramifications if this ruling holds up, which there's ever – look, Trinidad Chambliss got his year of eligibility reinstated, but, the same type of deal. They went and found a judge in Mississippi who gave him the kind of ruling that they were looking for. You are opening Pandora's box because this judge is setting precedent that anyone in college football can bet on games they're playing in by doing this. That's what he is saying, that you can bet on games that you're playing in, which was, the reason that the NCAA had this rule. And it's the reason that every professional sports league has this kind of rule. You can't bet on games that you and your team are participating in. But that's not what this judge is saying. He's saying that doesn't matter, and like, again, $90,000 he wagered on all these different sports. This is not just chump change that he was throwing around. This is a large sum of money that he was, in total that he wagered. Irish Hightown says the NCAA needs to grow some stones and ban him for life. The NCAA has already banned him for life. Like that's what their initial ruling is, that he is no longer eligible to play in an NCAA sanctioned sports. But this judge has thrown this out, and that's
it
where we are now.
overrules the NCAA.
He overruled the NCAA. They were trying to ban him for life. They said he was banned for life. The question is, Salty Virginia Peanuts is saying that this will not survive appeal. The question will be, when does the appeal come? Does it get to the appeal? Because it obviously will go up a level in terms of court. Will it even come before the season begins at this point? That's something that we don't know. In the meantime, Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports says that he has talked to Big 12 athletic directors who say that they've had serious talks about their teams not playing Texas Tech. Could you see that actually happening?
That's all talk. That's not going to happen at the end of the day. That's just very reactionary. It's just, there's no way that teams are removing a conference game from the schedule. Now you have to figure out how to fill that hole.
Well, it's a forfeit. I mean, if the Big 12 says you're supposed to play a team and you don't play a conference game, the Big 12 can say, fine, that's a forfeit. You're forfeiting that game, as the other team that was supposed to play Texas Tech. If Iowa State says we're not going to play Texas Tech and Iowa State goes through and doesn't play it, then the Big 12 can just say that's a forfeit. That's a loss. So all you're going to do is hurt yourself by trying to take a stand.
Yeah, I mean, it's all smoke at the end of the day. All the games are going to be played. Sorsby is going to be the quarterback on 10 of 12 of them. And Texas Tech is just going to, go along and pretend like nothing happened at the end of the day.
Again, like Salty says, appeals can be expedited for cause. This is one such situation. I mean, these are all best case scenarios that you're throwing out. They can be. That doesn't mean it will be. It could still happen sometime in the middle of the season. Why is it going to be a priority for some federal judge to put a football player on his docket? You can't guarantee that.
There's bigger and more corrupt things going on, unfortunately.
Right. And I've seen plenty of people say, well, this is exactly why government needs to be involved. No, it's not. It's still not why government needs to be involved, because we're talking about sports as opposed to, other much more pressing things that the government actually needs to be involved with. But the other side of this is, like we were just talking last week about, there's all this stuff floating around that Texas Tech wants to schedule some big blue blood, and they expect to put them.
They're not going to do that now.
We were talking from a Notre Dame perspective. It would be great to have Texas Tech on the schedule. Does this, and the fact that Texas Tech is willing to stomach this and keep this guy on their roster for the sake of winning games, does it change your mind about wanting Notre Dame to potentially play Texas Tech down the line?
No, I mean, I don't. It doesn't change my mind at all. And I'm actually surprised that Texas Tech was willing to buy out Abilene Christian and Texas's first week opponent to play Texas without Sorsby, because that's ultimately what would happen in this scenario. So, I mean, the one player doesn't change my perception about Texas Tech as a whole. They'll move on. They'll continue to be a good program because now they have the NIL backing to do so. It's just they're stuck in a situation where Sorsby has to fit into this, into this season, and they're going to do everything possible to make sure he plays. But as soon as this season is done, they'll find someone else to play quarterback, and they'll be, like I said, they'll have the funding to be a really good roster. So it doesn't change anything for me.
Right. And obviously I'm not trying to say that Sorsby would be playing against Notre Dame, because this will be Sorsby's last year in college one way or another. And that's part of why this judge just, declared that it would do Sorsby irreparable harm, because he has one more year of eligibility remaining. And he obviously stands to gain a lot if he has a good year in terms of his NFL draft stock and that kind of thing, which again is complete hogwash. It was against the rules that were set forth that he agreed upon by accepting a scholarship to play at an NCAA sanctioned school. You can't bet on your own team. You can't, wager on college sports, period. Someone mentioned earlier that there were some Iowa wrestlers who lost a year of eligibility because they wagered on, not on their own team, but they wagered on college sports, so at a very minimum, he should have to sit out for this year, but he bet on his own team, which is supposed to be a lifetime ban. But we'll see how fast, because we're talking about a month and a half now, basically a little bit more than a month and a half before training camp opens, fall training camp opens for college football teams. So we'll see if they actually push this through and get it into some appeals court before then. But I highly doubt it. I doubt anything's going to happen before the actual season starts. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes here left. Russell Wilson announced his retirement last week. He's going to join CBS Sports, be on TV, rather than be the backup to Geno Smith with the New York Jets. Do you buy Russell Wilson? Buy or sell him as a Hall of Famer, Jesse?
I actually have to buy Russell Wilson as someone who's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I think you can make a case that Eli Manning is ultimately going to make the Hall of Fame. And Eli Manning has ultimately kind of become my, there's a term for it. He's like my measuring stick for NFL quarterbacks, because I don't personally believe Eli Manning was good enough to be in the Hall of Fame, but he has the Super Bowl wins off the backs of some pretty good Giants teams. And then you start looking at, where where Russell Wilson stacks up all time. His passing yards are 15th all time. His, passing touchdowns are 12 all time. His career passer rating is going to be top 5 all time. He's going to be top 3 in quarterback efficiency. He's one of the better top 5 dual threat production quarterbacks of all time, of 40,000 rushing yards and 40,000 passing yards, 5,000 rushing yards. And then you go to look at his resume. He's got a Super Bowl. He's a 10-time Pro Bowler. He's right on the cusp. But again, I think that because he won that Super Bowl, he's going to end up being in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he's the only quarterback in NFL history with more than 40,000 passing yards and 5,000 and even 4,000 rushing yards. He's got over 5,000 rushing yards. I don't disagree. Stymie, stats are for losers. We can all say it together. But when you're talking about Hall of Fame cases, this is when stats get heavily leaned on, right? He had a 4-year stretch of 140 touchdown passes and 36 interceptions, but was never an MVP, never a serious MVP consideration. But he's got a 3.1 touchdown to interception ratio, which is slightly better than Tom Brady. It's way better than Peyton Manning, and it's also better than Drew Brees. Manning is in the Hall of Fame. Drew Brees is in the Hall of Fame. My eyeball test says he is a deteriorating quarterback who probably doesn't deserve to be there, but he does have that Super Bowl, and the numbers back him up. So I think he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I do think he's a bubble guy, though. I'll be curious to see how long it takes him to get in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he's definitely not a first ballot guy, but he falls in the tier of like Ben Roethlisberger, Matt Ryan, Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, and all those guys are likely going to end up in the Hall of Fame. So how can you leave out Russell Wilson?
Exactly. I think he's going to end up in there. Having that Super Bowl win is going to be a big.
And he was the MVP of that Super Bowl.
Right. Even though he was never a regular season MVP, he was a Super Bowl MVP, and obviously knocking on the door, if not for that interception, of winning a second straight. That would have definitely sealed it for him. I always felt like he needed another championship run in this late, career run that he's been with between Denver and Pittsburgh, but it obviously didn't happen. All right, that's going to do it for tonight. We'll be back with more hate tomorrow. Also, Matt Taylor, Indianapolis Colts play-by-play announcer, will join us on the show tomorrow. We're going to talk about the Colts as well as some of the Notre Dame Colts connections on that team, like Riley Leonard, Quentin Nelson, and so on. We will do that on tomorrow's show. So looking forward to having Matt with us tomorrow. Jesse, enjoyed it as always. I will talk to you tomorrow, sir. And we will talk to everybody else then. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.